This is Alabama Politics with Steve Flowers, an in-depth interview with Alabama's top political newsmakers. Now, from the studios of Troy University, here is Steve Flowers.
I'm Steve Flowers, and welcome to Alabama Politics. We have as our guest tonight a gorgeous young lady named Christy Mehaffey. Christy is, folks, the director of the Children's First program in Alabama. She is an advocate for children throughout the state, and we're glad to have Christy on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Steve. I'm glad to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. And Christy has been heading this organization for 7 or 8 years, and I think that's about right, isn't it, Christy?
That's correct.
7 or 8 years. And we have had a lot of folks ask about Children's First. It's a very popular program, but we're going to delve into how it was started tonight and the different things it does and how it helps the state of Alabama. And the one thing I want to make our viewers aware of, it is not a state agency.
No, it is not a state agency. A lot of people mistake us for that.
And I thought that. You know, when we talked about you first being on the program, I thought, well, that's an agency of some DHR or something like that.
No.
And I thought maybe it was a state agency, but it's a children's advocacy group, well known throughout the state. Christy, how did you get interested in helping in the Children's First program? How did you get involved in it?
Well, originally I moved to Montgomery to work at Huntington College, which we're all very aware of. And a friend of mine said there was a job opening for executive directorship at Children First. And at Auburn University, I studied family and child development. And I thought, this is right up my alley. I think maybe I'll go apply for this job and see what it entails. And I interviewed with some board members. As you know, Chief Justice Sue Bell Cobb, along with others, started Children First Foundation. And I went and interviewed with them and wound up doing lobbying work, which is something I never thought I'd be doing, but I really enjoy it.
Christy, now, Judge Sue Bell Cobb, who was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, she was one of the original founders.
Absolutely.
Board. Is she still on the board?
Absolutely, she is, along with John Hall, who is an attorney in Birmingham, and Marion Lofton, which a lot of people
I
in
know
this.
Marion
Marion's
well.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Matt Gibson was a very active
From
original
Prattville.
member. Yes. And so our group is a very nonpartisan group of individuals that are really just interested in the well-being of children, which is wonderful to see in the state when you have so much division sometimes, that people can come together for the betterment of children.
Are those same people still on the board?
Yes, sir. Well, Mac actually rotated off a few years ago, but he's still very active.
Who took
Mac,
his
of course,
place?
is ABC commissioner, so he's doing that.
Are we going to film him next month?
Oh, you are?
Yeah, he and William Thigpen coming on next
Matt
month.
Gibson. He's a wonderful man.
Yeah, and I'll tell you were on. But Chris, let me ask this. Let's go back and just explain to people, if you will, what year was Children's First originally formed, organized?
Well, in 1995, a group of juvenile judges got together for a meeting. And they were sitting around talking about how there are wonderful state programs for children, but there wasn't enough money to fund them. And so Children First kind of evolved from that conversation, and they decided to form a nonprofit. It wasn't just juvenile judges. Other advocates got together and said, you know, we need to really have one voice for children out there. We need to have a lobbyist that's up at the State House lobbying for children and that fight for funding for children's programs. So our biggest accomplishment was, back in 2000, we helped establish the Children First Trust Fund. My board got together with a bunch of legislators, Republican and Democrat, and they wrote the legislation that established the fund. And it comes from the National Tobacco Settlement. I'm sure you're familiar with that, Steve.
I was in the legislature when it was formed.
You were?
I was one of the co-sponsors.
Well, I apologize that I did not know that. That was before my time.
Yeah, I was in the legislature from 82 through 98, and I remember.
So you remember us working on it? Oh, yeah. Well, you know,
I was one of the co-sponsors of the legislation.
Well.
Yeah, I forget.
Thank you, sir.
I forget who the original sponsor was, but I was a co-sponsor.
Was it Mac really involved when y'all first?
Yeah, Mac was involved, and I think he was the primary sponsor.
Mac
was in the house with me, and we're good friends, and he was in the house. And we've got a lot of Mac's friends watch this show, and Mac's been on the show several times.
Oh, yes. Well, we certainly appreciate, of course, that was before my time, but let me thank you publicly, dear, for your work on that.
So 95 it started, and that was when Sue Bell, she worked diligently on that.
Oh, my gosh, they worked so hard. You know, at first they tried to get a tobacco tax passed.
That's what I know,
and that was so difficult, they could not do it. And that's when this settlement was going on with the tobacco companies, and they said, well, if it comes through, we'll give y'all some of it.
Yeah.
And then it actually came through.
Right.
And about half of it goes every year to the Children First Trust Fund.
So explain to the viewers, though, Christy, the board was formed. It was a coalition of two advocacy agencies, was it not?
Children First, you're right. Alabama Children First is two entities. Children First Foundation, which is what they originally started back in the late 90s. And now we have the Children First Alliance. And the reason we have two is because Alabama Children First does C4 work and C3 work. And this is kind of an IRS educational thing, but C4 organizations can lobby all they want. And that's what the foundation does. And that's what I do. I go up and lobby, and then our lobbyist group that helps us, Franklin Resources Group, does that. We do that with the C4 funds. And the C3 organization, we do things like work with state agencies on the off time when we're not in session and have conferences and things like that. So really we do two different things. We lobby, and then we also do a lot of nonprofit work.
What state agencies do y'all work with?
Oh, goodness.
DHR?
Yes, the Children First Trust Fund goes to 12 state agencies. DHR, DYS, mental health, multiple needs, the Department of Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention, all these different agencies. So what we do is we've developed relationships with them through the years, and we say, what are y'all's biggest issues? What are your greatest things you've done this year? Share with us your successes, but also tell us what you need help with. And so since we are not a state agency, we can go in and advocate where others cannot, because of course our state agencies can't lobby. But we do talk to them about what they need, and they share with us best practices that will help children, and they tell us what things need to be funded in the state. So then when I go talk to legislators, I am educated and working with our state agencies that were formed to help children.
Forgive me if I ask this question. The money that we are allocated from the tobacco settlement in the mid-90s,
yes,
that money no longer exists, or does it?
Oh, yes.
Y'all, that's how you still get the money.
Yes, sir.
That's y'all's root of your.
That's
How much of that appropriation do y'all get every year? Do you know?
Well, I
about
tell
what?
people roughly we get about the state gets about $100 million a year, and about half of it goes to the Children First Trust Fund. And so, as that money comes into the state, it goes to 12 state agencies. And if you'll remember from when y'all wrote the legislation, you did a great job, because the money is very accountable. Each one of those state agencies has to submit a plan of investment before they get the funds. And then after they do that, they have to produce a report that says how many children were served. I mean, no other state dollars are that accountable, Steve. You know that.
Do you administer those funds? Or
No,
how?
sir. That's another misconception we have. All we do, we are a nonprofit. I tell people we're a bunch of do-gooders. All we do is go up to the State House, make sure that it's appropriated properly, make sure it follows the statute. As you'll recall, the statute says DHR gets 20%. You know, ABCs get 0.5%. Different agencies get different percentages. We just go up there and watch over the legislation, make sure that it's done correctly. Because as you know, the general fund we've hit some lean times. And a $50 million pot of money can be pretty enticing sometimes.
Remind me of this. $50 million is in trust, and the corpus cannot be penetrated. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so the interest, with interest rates being low, the lower amount of money, it's not generating the kind of money it did at one time, is it?
Well, when it comes, some of it goes to the 21st Century Fund. When it first comes in, $13 million goes to that for debt settlement and things like that. But the money, that's a good question. I don't know, Steve, but I do know that every year the agencies ask in their plans of investment for the entire portion of what comes into the state every year, because we have to have it.
I don't think you can penetrate the $50 million. I think it's a corpus that's set up that it can't go below that. I'm not positive.
I'm not either. We'll have to research that.
I know the oil and gas fund is one of the biggest sources of revenue for the state general fund budget.
That's true.
That was set up in the 70s.
That's true.
And I was on that board in the 80s when we set that up. And Governor Wallace was governor in '82, and he put me on that board, and it oversaw, and it can't be, you can't go into the principle of that money either.
Well, they talk about that's like our savings account for our future generations. You know, that's what I read about. Governor Wallace set that up. That's what he said.
Yeah.
Am I correct in that?
It is. Christy, now tell basically then. Y'all are an advocacy group that's a non-state agency.
Correct.
That advocates for children on all levels.
Yes, sir.
And that makes sense that the judges would be the ones who would be the originators of that. Sue Bell came up as a district judge in Conecuh County.
Yes, sir, that's right.
She spent a lot of years
right.
in seeing how children came before the courts, and how they were
that's right.
neglected sometimes.
The juvenile judges in the state really see how prevention can change children's lives. And that's what this money, the Children First Trust Fund, was. That was its core value, is that prevention. We can prevent these kids from becoming juvenile offenders. We can prevent them from being in our correction system. And as you know, at 195% capacity right now, Alabama obviously needs to do something to prevent more people from funneling into our prison system.
What kind of legislation are y'all looking at this year, Christy?
Well, forever and ever, we will protect the Children First Trust Fund. That's always number one on our list. Number two on our list this year, we would like to see a tobacco tax passed, honestly, Steve. I mean, we kind of cut our teeth on that, as you're very aware of. Alabama, we have a very low cigarette tax in comparison to other states. If we could raise our cigarette taxes $1 on each pack of cigarettes and just then meet the national average. And as you know, the general fund has been lean for a long time. If we did that, it would generate $200 million in revenue, and that is a conservative estimate. And it would reduce teen smoking by 20%. So Children First feels as if these state agencies that we advocate so hard for, they need the funds to run their agency and provide services to children and families. And right now, that's becoming harder and harder.
So going back to the 95 time.
Yes.
Tell me what all has expanded or stayed the same, and that's been close to 20 years now.
Yes.
That's been going on.
Yes. I mean, Children First, as far as our foundation, is that what you're asking, how
Yeah.
we've expanded?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I like to tell people we run a lean and mean machine. For years, there's only 2 employees at Children First now. I mean, people, and we have, of course, Johnny Crawford and Ryan DeGraffney with Franklin Resources Group. They help us lobby, but and Susan Hanson. So we're a small advocacy group, but I have a board of 24 members that's strong and well connected and really able to fight for children when I need them to. So we just have a small office here in Montgomery, and I'm up at the State House during session, and during the off time I'm doing research to see what we can do the next year for legislative purposes. And I have a media specialist now, Miss Evie Bell Owen, who helps.
And Evie's here with us today.
Evie is here with us
We're glad
today.
to have her with us. Christy, now what do you think, in your opinion, has been the biggest accomplishment during the entire, let's call it 20 years that Children's First has been active, and during your 7-year reign? What would you say the proudest accomplishment, some of y'all's accomplishment? We just,
Yeah.
Don't be, shy about it. Just say, what do you think are the best things that the group has done in the 20 years to help children, and expound on that, and then, what do you think your best accomplishment been the last 7 years as director?
Well, obviously the Children First Trust Funds, the crown jewel of Children First. I mean, it's helped hundreds of thousands of children in this state. I cannot tell you the impact it has on children every day. And sometimes it's easy to forget that as we're up at the State House fighting for this money. It all seems like play money in a way when you're up at the State House. You don't ever see who it really affects. But it definitely affects those little faces every day in the state of Alabama, especially considering that 28% of our children live in poverty now. So that I'd say would be the crown jewel of what we've done. Since I've been there, when I first came on board, I remember I had not done this type of work before, and my board chairman, Wendy Crew at the time, said, "Christy, I want you to go print this bill out. This is our main bill this year." And I was like, okay, I'll go print it out.
Wendy's a lawyer in Birmingham, isn't she?
Yes, she is.
Uh-huh,
She's
yeah.
wonderful. She was our board chair for 3 years, and she's still on the board. Very good child advocate. So I went and I printed this bill off. It was 200 pages, Steve. I was so overwhelmed. I'm not an attorney. So I start reading through this bill. Well, the bill was regarding the Juvenile Justice Reform Act. Did you hear much about the Juvenile Justice Reform Act?
Tell our viewers about it then.
Well, it was a lot of people who came together. Chief Justice Sue Bell Cobb at the time, DYS, all kind of people came together to rewrite the juvenile code here in Alabama. A lot of people don't know this, but before you could detain a juvenile who had committed no crime. And what we were finding is that our juvenile beds in Alabama were becoming very crowded. And that's a very expensive practice, not to mention that it also exposes a child who may have cussed at his teacher or talked back to his parents and wouldn't come home. Suddenly they're exposed to people who really do bad things. And so they learn about things that maybe they wouldn't have if we had not placed them in that kind of situation. So there's a class of children called CHINs, Children in Need of Supervision. And those children were being detained in Alabama quite frequently. So this revision went in and clarified that and said you couldn't just lock up kids for cussing out their teacher, that we needed to come up with better ways in Alabama to deal with these children. So what we did was it passed, and it was a huge bill. You can imagine a 200-page bill. As a former legislator, you know what that's like. We passed the bill. I think that was my second year here. It was very exciting. It was a wonderful time. And now DYS is able to funnel that money that used to go for expensive beds into community-based programs at the local level to intervene with these juveniles. It's wonderful. The juvenile crime has gone down in the state since we passed the bill, and we're also saving millions every year.
Wow.
So it was, and it's something that we really talked about a lot when it passed, but it's one of those things, you know, it rides high at the time and then people kind of forget, but it's something that's really changed the lives of a lot of juveniles in this state.
That's probably been the best thing you've seen happening.
I'm really excited about that. We did the graduated driver's license bill, which was great too. It put some restrictions on 16-year-olds.
Tell our viewers about that, if you would.
Well, you know, all of us have our experience of we turn 15, we get our learner's permit. This bill says that now your parents have to sign off that they supervised you for 30 hours when you're 15. Then a year later, whenever you get your driver's license, when you're 16, 17, whatever, you can only drive during certain hours of the day. Like you can't drive late at night, like after midnight, because they found that crashes go up a lot for teens. You can't use your cell phone. You can't use any handheld device, things like that. What we did was we based it on national legislation that looked at teen deaths from driving. And we were very excited about that. MAC actually sponsored that for years. I think 3 or 4 years we worked so hard on that. That was a difficult bill because everybody internalizes that and thinks about their experience when they were driving. They're like, I don't want those restrictions, but we educated our lawmakers and they figured out it was the right thing to do. Mac worked really hard on that.
Mac is a good guy.
Yes, he is.
Now, you have 24 board members, Christy. How are they selected? How long a term they serve and that sort of thing?
You know, that's interesting. I mean, we have bylaws and things like that, but our board members ask other people. They nominate other people. And our board, they have to go through a process where they read about what they have to do and what they're expected to do. I mean, people rotate on and off all the time, but you have people like Marion, who's been there from the beginning. People like Sue Bell, you know, she has been such a rock for this organization. John Hall, same thing. Wendy. John Merrill is on our board. Senator Priscilla Dunn is on our board. They're a very well-rounded. Elizabeth Huntley, I don't know if you know Liz Huntley, she's on our board, she's great. But they're a very well-rounded group of individuals. I'm so honored to work with all of them. They're wonderful.
Well, those are some outstanding board members. There's no regional, just this is self-sustaining, that when someone goes off, they decide who they want to be on there and that sort of thing. Really,
it's more of a conversation among the board members. They kind of know what's going on with child advocacy, so it's not necessarily a regional thing. We do try to choose from all over the state, but we usually meet here in Montgomery. And there's somebody I keep forgetting to mention, and I should. That's Sherry McKean. She's my board member here. She's my board chair. She's great. She's been on the board for 2 years. Do you know Sherry? She's very active here in Montgomery. She's done all kind of things.
Yeah, I think I know who you're talking about.
She's great.
Christy, tell me this. Now, going back to those board members, which one had been on there since the origination? Was it Sue Bell has been, John Hall has been?
John, Sue, Marion.
Marion been on there from the beginning. From
the beginning, which is wonderful because you have a great historical knowledge.
Yeah.
And someone like John Houston, you know John, who is mental health commissioner. Yeah. John's on the board now. I mean, John's such a wealth of knowledge when we're talking about these things.
Yeah.
I mean, they all bring something to the table and a passion to the table that really helps.
Christy, when you were at Auburn, you majored in something that's perfect for this. So
Yes, sir. Family and child development, yes, sir.